This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, March 24th, 2022, and my guest is the awesome Brad Molen. It's a reunion show. Hey, Brad, how are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm really happy to be able to be here.
I'm super happy to have you back. How are you able to be on a podcast with me, Brad? What's going on?
It's magic, Miriam. So I can officially say I am no longer with TCL. So today is my last day with the company. So I am now technically a free bird, at least for a few days. So I wanted to take the opportunity to come on and have a great reunion show with you.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, folks, you better catch that free bird before it escapes, huh? So, hey, Brad, we've got a bunch of news items, but you know how the show goes. You've done it many times before with me. You know that it's all about the tangents. So I'm hoping that our conversation kind of like go off left and right as we talk about these news items. I want to start with the Moto Edge Plus for 2022. Can I just have a little rant about the namings and the nomenclature that Moto is using? Like they're now adding, like they're doing the Apple thing, MacBook Air mid 2021. Like they're adding that year at the end. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed that, and the naming does get very confusing because then you have the Edge 30 Pro and the Edge 30, and is there an Edge Stylus?
Exactly, because in other parts of the world, they even have different names for the same phone.
Right.
I'm not happy with that. That's bugging me right there. So that doesn't mean I don't like this phone. I actually like this phone. This phone is a very nice, affordable flagship that's not affordable. You see the problem there? They
right.
Screwed that up.
Yeah, it's $900. Is that right?
Roughly, yeah. For the unlocked version, $899, I think. Oh, it's probably $899.99, so it's probably $900. You're right. Anyway, but the point is that there's also a Verizon, which has even a worse name, right? It's Moto Edge Plus 5G UW. From TCL, that's what they do to your phones. They totally butchered your TCL 10 Pro 5G UW or whatever it was back in the day.
Right. Yep. We had to go with the 10 5G UW.
That it was just a 10. See, there was no Pro in there. Now I'm making it even worse. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the naming is a bit weird because of this, year that they're adding to the name of their phones, but also because this is called Edge based on the original series of Edge phones from 2020, which had really excessively curved displays, right? Like really like waterfall, kind of like this kind of gimmicky, the screen goes halfway down the side kind of deal. And now they are flat screens.
So now it's flat edge?
See, this is what I'm
Edgeless?
saying. I asked them about that. Last year they did the Moto Edge 2021, which was a mid-ranger, and it really was a terrible phone. I was really disappointed with it. And I asked them then, I said, you made this phone that doesn't have a curved edge. It's called the Edge. Why is it called the Edge? It's not even a leading edge device in terms of specs. So why are you calling it the Edge? And they're like, because it's our brand for the kind of higher end phones in the US. And I was like, but you also use Edge abroad.
So this is their Galaxy, right?
Yeah, well, okay, not quite, because see, that's the thing. I said it's an affordable flagship. So this is really more of a Pixel 6/OnePlus 9 competitor. And I say OnePlus 9 because we don't have a OnePlus 10 this year, which is kind of the affordable entry-level flagship from OnePlus. At least not yet. So
it's only in China still, or
the
has
OnePlus
it come out to
10
Europe?
Pro is supposedly coming to the US at some point soon. I think there's rumors, or maybe it's been confirmed now. I can't remember. The 31st is what I heard rumor-wise. But
interesting.
It's just the Pro as far as I know. But so there's no 10, but last year there was a 9 and a 9 Pro, and the 9 had a plastic frame and didn't have OIS. But it still had the flagship Snapdragon 888, and it still had the nice screen. It still had, all the flagship thingies. But This is kind of like that because like the OnePlus 9 and like the Pixel 6, it doesn't have a telephoto, you know? It doesn't have a metal frame. The Pixel 6 is ahead there. It has a metal frame. And of course, if you buy Verizon's version, you get millimeter wave. But if you buy the unlocked version, you don't get millimeter wave. And so you're going to say, why is the unlocked version more expensive then? Well, did you see the storage? It's 512 gigs. The unlocked, and 128 gigs for the Verizon. No SD, so you're screwed. You have to pick one.
Oh my goodness, that is a huge difference.
Yeah, right. Well, there is a Verizon version with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, in addition to the standard 8 128. And then, of course, the unlocked is 8 512.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a weird. And they've kind of done that. Their unlocked phones lately have had very generous RAM and storage. And you kind of scratch your head, why? Like, why not bring the price down? You don't have to skimp on storage, but maybe a middle ground?
Interesting.
What's your take on that?
Well, I'm trying to understand why Moto is pricing this at the $850 to $900 price range when it's going up against some of the giants like the Galaxy.
So that's exactly it. You're paying Pixel 6 Pro and Galaxy S22 or 22 Plus pricing for this, yet you're not getting a telephoto and you're getting a plastic chassis. The plastic frame, I'm not too worried about that. In fact, if you pop the SIM card open, you can see that there's actually a metal frame under the plastic. It's kind of like, you remember the Pixel 5 that had that plastic finish on the back, but when they scraped at it, like when Zach at Jerry Rig scraped away at it, he found that it was plastic, like thin layer on top of a metal chassis. That's the same thing. So it's not going to be it's not a strength problem or a quality of materials problem. It's just more the way it feels in your hand, because you know how shiny plastic kind of feels slimy and fingerprinty, whereas aluminum, like an anodized aluminum, with the antenna bands, like that TCL phone last year, the 20 Pro, that feels pro, that feels nice, that feels high end, right?
Right.
So
yeah, I do feel like if this were to go up against the Pixel 6 rather than the Pixel 6 Pro, it would have a lot more success, especially given the brand recognition, right? So
yeah, I think they could have priced it even $100 more than the Pixel 6. Because it's Moto and gotten away with it, like $699, because there are some things it's doing, that I think are really good, like the millimeter wave. That's that you have to get a 6 Pro from Google to get that, right? And then it would undercut to some extent the S22 in a way. But I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot. Of course, how it's Moto, so it's going to be on sale in 2 days. It's going to be in the basket, like.
The bargain bin.
Exactly, the bargain bin, the bargain basket at the end of the,
along with all the cassette tapes think of that, from the 80s.
I have this image in my head totally of Blockbuster. Remember?
Yes.
The video stores, the end cap had always the bargain bin of DVDs and VHSs. Anyway.
And it was always stuff that you never heard of before.
Yeah.
Right? It was always just like some random direct to DVD sequel or prequel that of a movie that you saw maybe once.
And it was always
ago.
a Rutger Hauer movie for some reason.
And there's always like 20 or 30 of them. And that was, and sometimes you could actually dig deep into the bargain bin and you could find a gem, but was it really worth all that time and energy? No, not really.
Like Psycho Killer 7. I didn't know even that there was a 5 and a 6 before that.
He's back.
That's right.
At this time, he's mad.
See, Brad?
Right.
See, you're finding your radio voice again. So, no, look, this Moto phone. Okay, so let's recap a little. The original Edge 2020 and Edge Plus 2020 were really nice phones. Like, metal and glass, super premium looking. Now, the Edge was decontented versus the Edge Plus, and the Edge Plus was a Verizon special where the Edge was an unlocked phone. And I think that was their mistake. At the time, it was a proper flagship. It had all the specs, but because it was limited to Verizon, it didn't really see the kind of sales Moto wanted. And also it was competing with It was $1,000 back then. That was 2 years ago. So it was competing with the S20 Ultra at the time, and the, OnePlus 8 Pro at the time was an incredible phone for the money. So it was really not going to be successful. And in a way, this partnership there with Verizon is what kind of was the downfall of this great phone they made. So the next year, they decide to combine the two, like last year, 2021, into a single Moto Edge non-plus mid-ranger Snapdragon 778, I want to say, and a LCD panel with massive bezels, especially a big chin at the bottom, at 144 hertz, and all plastic build, not even a glass back, but a fake glass plastic. But you know what I'm saying? It was just like, yes. What are you doing? And then they sold it for $700 unlocked and $550 on Verizon, and the Verizon version had millimeter wave. And there was nothing about that phone that was any good. Like it had mono speaker. Like basically the display was an LCD, so it had all the problems of an LCD. Like it was a high refresh, but you had all this light bleeding and the big chin at the bottom. And the cameras were okay, but only the main one, the 108, was decent, but didn't have OIS. So at night it was nah. The 8 megapixel ultra wide is meh. So like we all yelled at them. We were like, this is a terrible phone. We all gave it really bad reviews. And I remember having a conversation with the folks at Moto about this, going, guys, we know you can do better than this. Like what were you thinking? And I think they took our feedback, because this new phone, honestly, Brad, other than the pricing, it is a good phone. It's just not priced right. Like I really think that if you're interested in a Moto, because the software really is awesome, in some ways, I think it's better than Pixel software. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in the experience and you're a Verizon customer and you can pick up this thing in a week, 2 weeks, a month for $699 or $599, 100% worth it. Like the plastic chassis, man, whatever, frame is, you'll leave, you put a case on it, you don't care. The biggest problem though is it can't really be a flagship without a telephoto. And the OnePlus 9 has that problem. Although the OnePlus 9 is now $599, so at that price it makes sense. People are going to say the Pixel 6 has that problem. And I'm going to say, well, but it's $599 from the get-go.
Exactly.
So you're going to look at it and go, and it has super zoom as well, like the crazy, awesome, So you're going to be okay without the telephoto. But this thing can zoom to save its life. It's a 15 megapixel sensor. I'm not sure what brand it is. It's definitely not a Sony from the behavior I'm seeing. So it's not a good sensor, at least not a well-tuned sensor. And as a result, it falls apart as soon as you zoom more than 3x, like really badly. And then in low light, it's, mid-range-ish performance at best. It's only when there's a lot of light that it's good. And it has OIS. I mean, they put it back in there. So I want to give them kudos. You know how I feel about that?
You're the biggest proponent of OAS that I've ever met.
Honestly, on this phone, it just feels like it's not on. Like, I mean, it is on. I can see it when I move the phone in the viewfinder. But in terms of the results you get, you're not getting any of the benefits of OIS. I can kind of understand when Moto told me, yeah, we don't think OIS is that critical, because they probably don't know how to tune it or something, but they put it in there, and they put a 50 megapixel ultra wide. And you're going to say, ooh, that sounds like, the Oppo Find X3 Pro and Find X5 Pro with a dual 50 megapixel. No, completely different sensors. The main sensor is, as I said, kind of meh. It's probably not a Sony. And then this ultra wide, get this, 0.64 micron pixels. So it pixel bins them to 1.28 microns. And that means that it's okay. But it's, again, I think it's like some Omnivision, like a brand new sensor, because at the 0.6 micron is a brand new thing. Like we've never been able to make pixels this small on a phone before. So they're using a brand new sensor that nobody's tuned yet. And man, you can see it. It's so bad. And so I'm like, so you made an ultra wide that on paper spec wise is awesome, but then doesn't really deliver. It does have autofocus on the ultra wide, which lets it also act as a macro, which is nice. And then of course it has a third camera on the back, and you're like, ooh, telephoto. No, it's a 2 megapixel depth sensor, because sticker cams are a thing.
Oh yes, depth and macro.
Man, I'm so sick and tired.
They just come on everything.
I kind of understand at certain price points, especially in certain markets like India where it's competitive and the number of cameras make a difference on your spec sheet.
See, especially if you're looking at, budget and mid-range phones, if you have 4 cameras, that's going to come off as more desirable than having 2 cameras. It's just easier to market that way. Yeah. But when you're looking at, again, a $900 price point, having your third camera be just a depth sensor does not compute. It does not make any sense.
Yeah, and that's why, the OnePlus 9 we're talking about it now, which is, going to be gone soon. But it's still relevant because that's kind of the league that phone is playing in. That phone also had that 2 megapixel macro or whatever. And that phone was overpriced at the time, and now is $599, the price it should have always been, right? It's kind of refreshing to see that Google made a phone at $599 that doesn't have a lens that pretends to be something in the back that it isn't, right? It only has the 2 sensors in the back, ultra wide and the main, and more importantly has a metal frame too, which is pretty amazing for that price point these days because so many phones are dropping that feature. So obviously it can be done, and Moto of all companies could do it. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think the other thing that's also weird here or interesting or I guess it's good, but because it's new, it's also tuned like crap, is the selfie cam. 60 megapixel, 0.6 microns. So it pixel bins down to 15 megapixel, 4:1 at 1.2 microns. And so, it's kind of like, why didn't you just put a 12 megapixel sensor in there with 1 micron pixels and you wouldn't have to do any kind of weird computational stuff to actually get a good photo out of it? And
because 60 sounds better than 12 on paper.
Know, but it does do 4K video on the front, which, as you know, half of the BBK phones don't, and half of the Xiaomi phones don't at this price point. Even flagships from BBK don't have 4K video on the front. So that's a good thing. I don't know. I feel like if they just drop the price, I could be on board. The display on this thing, Brad, is gorgeous. It is a 1080p AMOLED, 144 hertz, flat. So the weird edge naming, but no bezels. The bezels are minimal and equal all the way around. It looks kind of like, the Pixel 6 has that even bezel thing, even though they're a little thicker, they're even, and it just looks right. That's the same here. And that display, it's not LTPO. It doesn't vary the refresh rate from 1 hertz to whatever, right? So it just switches between 60, 90, 120, 144 if you put it in auto, and you can peg it to 144 if you want.
Okay.
So if you're a gamer or something, this is a great phone. You got a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, kick ass. You've got a 144 hertz, gorgeous ultra bright and daylight AMOLED. So they totally knocked it off the park. They put back the awesome stereo speakers from the original Edge series, which sounded, I still think there are 2 phones that I've used where I was like, I cannot believe the sound is coming from that thing. And those were the Xiaomi Mi 11 and this phone, or previous Motos with the same speaker system. It's unreal. You're like, how, what? This phone is making this music? It's so high quality. The speakers are super good. So the display is super good. The speakers are super good. They give it a glass back, which is a frosted blue shimmery thing. It doesn't pick up fingerprints. It's really good looking. If this had a metal frame, it would really be nice.
So I was going to ask a couple questions, mainly referring to the software. So you mentioned earlier that the software on this is better than Pixel?
Well, in some ways, I like it a lot. I think that for me, if I had to pick a software skin, I would either pick Pixel or Moto right now as my first 2 choices. And in some ways, Moto is more stock than Pixel. It's hard to explain, but Pixel's great. I live with it every day. It's just that, they add all this functionality, those features that come to the Pixel first, and it's becoming pretty intense. You have a lot of things you can do with your Pixel, and it doesn't feel quite as AOSP, the core pure stock Android-ish because of that, because you have all these extra embellishments to the OS. Now, it's still lightweight, it's still fast, it's still beautiful, it's still easy to use, it's still Android, it's still Google's vision on the Pixel. But I feel in a way, Moto's closer to stock, no skinning at all. And then they add those nice things like chop with your hand to turn on the flashlight, rotate your wrist to start the camera. There's all that thing where like attentive display where it notices that you're staring at it through the front facing camera. You have to set up Face ID for that, but whatever. It noticed and it doesn't turn off the phone. I mean, Samsung's been doing this for years as well, but it's such a nice little feature to have. The Pixel does it now too, where it won't rotate the display if you can see your eyes. So it's, if you're reading in bed, you don't have that problem where it's constantly like flipping on you and you're just like, oh God, I got to turn off auto, anyway.
Yeah.
Auto rotate.
Yeah. It's interesting because Motorola has for so many years been able to establish a reputation of having a user experience that's very close to stock, but not exactly. And they have been able to add in a few features of their own while still maintaining a lot of that stock look and feel, which I've always appreciated about Motorola.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. It's very appealing. When I first picked up that phone and didn't know the price and started using it, I'm like, I'm really liking this phone. I was super enthusiastic. I remember looking over at Theo and saying, wow, a Moto phone that doesn't suck. Like literally is the words that came out of my mouth. And then I found out the price and I'm like, Right. Also the camera performance. It's just, I don't know if you listened to the previous shows where I was joking around and using Moto as the baseline of bad camera for comparison. It was with the Red Magic 7 when I reviewed it recently on the show that I was like, oh yeah, so that's kind of matches a mid-range Moto phone in terms of imaging performance. So, we're starting to use Moto as a yardstick for bad quality of photography at various price points. And, on paper, the specs are rocking. I mean, it's missing a telephoto, but OIS on the main camera, omnidirectional PDAF, 50 megapixel on both sensors, autofocus on both sensors, including that macro mode for the ultra wide. The front camera does 4K video. I'm all like, okay, this is really nice on paper. And I started using it and I'm just like, ooh, wow. Like we're not even in the ballpark of like a $500 phone. I think it's on par with maybe the Moto Edge from last year, which was a Snapdragon 700 series and an 108 megapixel sensor without OIS. Now, sure, it had more pixels, but it had no stabilization. So I'm like, how did we get there? How did you mess that up so bad? But this is fixable in software. The problem is, right? They're not going to do it. They're going to update it maybe once or twice. It'll never live up to a Pixel 6 or Galaxy or even that OnePlus 9, honestly, at this point.
Is there going to be a difference between the Verizon version and the open market version in terms of software updates?
I assume so, because Verizon's a big gatekeeper. And of course, it comes totally full of bloatware. Mostly Verizon's, I might add. There's actually very few third-party apps. There's only Amazon Shopping. The device I reviewed is the Verizon one. And who needs an alternate phone dialer and an alternate text messaging app and an alternate voicemail app that's normally built into the dialer on a Pixel? I automatically just disable those and I bring the Google ones in, right, and install those. And I'm like, I don't understand why carriers still want all that stuff to be theirs.
Because they're hanging on to whatever differentiators they can. They need to make their device different than everyone else's.
Yeah, but it's worse. Have you seen those apps? The UI on them is terrible. It feels like you're using something from 2010, on a brand new phone.
Absolutely. I would be interested to find out how many people actually use the carrier-specific bloatware.
Most people.
I don't know if there's any stats on that.
I don't think so, but if there is, my bet is most people don't change it because they don't even know they can change it.
Mm-hmm.
How many people download the Google phone app, which is on the App Store and exists for every Android phone? I think I'm probably the only one. Every phone I have has the Google Messages and the Google phone app on it and the Google Contacts app as well. I replace them all and I disable the other ones and I'm done and I make them the defaults.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I use Google Messages on every phone that I use.
Exactly. I mean, RCS is so solid now, and the integration with iPhones and iOS is really tops. You can, you actually get some of the same behaviors because they've kind of managed to emulate that. So it's pretty damn great. But look, this Moto phone ultimately, again, great design other than the plastic frame. It has an incredible display. It has amazing speakers. It has all the 5G, especially the Verizon version, which does millimeter wave. I was getting 3 gigabits on that phone just down the street from here and 300 up. Like, holy crap. And then, it has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. It's so fast. It's so fluid with that 144 hertz display. It feels like a OnePlus. It's amazing. And you get good battery life. It's got a 4,800 milliamp hour battery with, are you ready? They brought it back. Wireless charging, 15 watt turbo power wireless charging, Qi compatible. They have 30 watt wired, which is okay, nothing spectacular. By the way, the Moto Edge 30 Pro, which is the international global version of that phone, has 68 watt wired charging. So I think that they cap it down for the US for some reason. But the bottom line is it's got reverse wireless charging. So again, it's very flagship in terms of specs, right? You get all the goodness. And the battery life, although it's 4,800, not 5,000, which a lot of flagships have today, still gives you close to 2 days of battery life. So solid battery life. And then you add that awesome software to it. And you're like, this is a winner. And then you find out the price and you're like, wah, 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 sad trombone of doom.
Certainly. And when you have wireless charging and all these other features, those are specs that you would expect from devices that are going to be $600 or $700 these days.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. You put in wireless charging, but it's a $900 phone, so
it's normal,
it
right?
really needs to be in there.
Yeah.
So, one other question that I had for you is, I've heard about the stylus support.
So it's funny,
or that's supposed to have stylus support.
The reviewer's guide doesn't mention it at all. And I completely forgot to even write about it in my review. But also, I don't know what stylus would I use? Like, is it using a Windows active stylus, like a standardized one? I probably have one of those floating around somewhere. But the fact that they didn't even mention it in the reviewer's guide, not even in the specs, is weird to me. So I didn't want to put it in the review, even though, first of all, I didn't think of it. But then when I could have edited the review and added it, I decided not to, because I don't even know if that's just something they announced and never really materialized. I need to ping Moto at this point. And folks, by the time, you get this podcast on audio in a few days, it'll probably be resolved. If you see a mention of the stylus or pen in my review, then you know that I've added that. But I haven't tested it. I assume it's there, but because the stylus doesn't have a silo, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's not a really good solution.
Right. It's nice to have it as an option, and maybe you throw in a third-party case or something that, I believe the Galaxy Fold 3 has the S Pen support, but doesn't have a silo, but you can get cases that allow that. That would be nice if Motorola had that option. At the very least, though, if you're looking at this as a $900 price point, why wouldn't you throw in a stylus? Even if there's no silo, there should be an actual stylus to go along with it. My guess is that they were working on a stylus for this and just couldn't get it out in time. Yeah,
because they did show us an accessory, I think, at the briefing or something. I can't remember if that's true or not. It might have been a third-party accessory that had, kind of like you said, for the Fold or the S21 Ultra last year, where it was a separate thing. But I'm happy with it. LG's last 2 or 3 flagships before they went, Sia, had pen support, and nobody really talked about it, but it was there. It was nice. I'm for it, but I feel like this should be integrated. And the Moto G stylus, there's several instances of that phone now, have it built in, and there's even apps installed that take advantage of it and detect the pen and stuff. I don't see any apps pre-installed on this phone right now that show any of that. So I'm not sure what the deal is here. I'm going to pull it out so you guys can see it. There we go. For those of you on Patreon right now, watching the video version of the podcast, patreon.com/TNKGRL. Check out. I pulled out the phone. It's beautiful. Super shimmery. Oops. I've got the fake background and it disappears a little bit, but it's nice. And
is it just the one color option?
There's a white as well.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me actually
Because you always have to have the boring color option because that's what everybody
they always send you
in this market.
Okay, so the screen is, well, it's doing weird things with the transparent mode of my Skype call, but it's a beautiful
The refresh
screen.
rate is so good that it can't even be captured.
It's so fast you can't even keep track of it, I know. But look, the point is that ultimately they did a misstep that they always do, which is always they seem to get their price off and then, kind of compensate by having sales. And I don't understand this strategy. And then this whole partnership, at least it's a little less, egregious this time around with the Verizon thing, because we're getting the same phone unlocked minus millimeter wave, which is okay. Like in my book, that's fine, But, again, back to the OnePlus 9 and Pixel 6, both of them have wireless charging at $599. So, the wireless charging is really not big of a deal. It should be there, as you said. And then the other thing, too, is IP52 instead of IP67 or 68. It's only splash proof.
Exactly.
At $900, you drop it in the toilet. It happens to everyone. That's never happened to me, actually. But anyway.
Something I'm curious about is, of course, Motorola has a high amount of importance placed on its partnership with Verizon. It doesn't have partnerships with the other carriers at this point, right?
No,
Motorola is not working with AT&T or T-Mobile.
They've had some exclusive AT&T phones. I don't remember any exclusive T-Mobile ones, but eventually they always make their way to Verizon in some way. And this one, the higher end ones, the Edge series, there's always been at least one of them being a Verizon product.
I see. See, what I'm guessing here is that Verizon played a big role in determining what kind of specs and features Motorola would come out with, and then came out with an open market version of that phone.
So that is actually what happened with the Edge 2021 last year, that really gimpy, terrible phone, because they just gutted it, because there is an international version of that phone that's significantly better. But this is exactly the Edge 30 Pro that the rest of the world got before us, just with millimeter wave for Verizon. They did not cut anything out.
Sure. But I do wonder, though, if this model came out as a result of Verizon wanting these exact specs and features, and then because of Verizon testing, which often takes a longer period of time, it actually came out to all the other markets first.
It's possible, but because they're a Lenovo company and they were one of the first two to announce a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 phone, which was that phone, in December, I think this was done way before Verizon.
I see. Okay.
Like in this case, I think even rewinding 6 months before that, when they were reaching out to Verizon saying, these are the phones we have, what do you like about them, which one do you want, and how do we decontent it? The conversation was, we have this phone, and somehow Verizon chose to not decontent it, which is incredible. And it's possibly because of pushback from Moto, because the media, have been pushing back on them saying, you got to stop Verizon from doing what they did to that poor Moto Edge 2021. They obliterated that phone. Like, when you look at the international version, it had an OLED panel at 144 hertz. They went to an LCD with a massive chin. They went to a plastic back. They removed so many things. They removed the telephoto. They removed the Snapdragon 888 and put a 768 or 778. It's just like they just trashed the thing. And that you can tell that was completely a Verizon thing, because there's no other phone like it. But this, there's a Chinese version, which is, I think, the Edge X30. Then there's the international global version, it's the Edge 30 Pro. Then there's the US Unlocked, which is the Edge Plus 2022. Then there's the Edge Plus 5G UW, which is Verizon model. So there's actually 4 SKUs of that phone already, which are identical other than millimeter wave, which, is obviously, if you design with it in mind and leave the room for the antennas in there, it's pretty easy to just add that, right? Because the chip supports it out of the box. You just need a power amplifier and an antenna. And so they design it for that, and then they leave it empty on the international SKUs, right? Or even the unlocked one, is what I'm thinking.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, that's my take on the Moto, folks. Basically, it's a lot.
It is. Always love to see Motorola come out with a flagship style device. I love to see as many OEMs as possible come out with devices to compete against the big dogs, because I think our market could really stand to benefit from more options.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it is a little disappointing to see that this is what they're bringing to the table, especially when Motorola has been around for so long. They know what they're doing, one would like to think. So, it's almost like it feels as though this was something that they did on purpose.
Yeah. And as I said,
they know that they could do better.
In my review, my headline is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because like we were really moving up and then the price just brought it back 1 notch. Like I think this phone is a perfectly good, decent, well-rounded, valid phone that should exist. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just opposed to the pricing. Whereas I was literally opposed to the even existence of the Edge 2021 last year. I was kind of left a bad taste in my mouth what Verizon did to that thing. They just destroyed it. It was a caricature of a phone. It was terrible. So this is good news. If Moto can continue in that direction and then adjust the pricing and maybe give us like a proper telephoto metal frame equivalent to that with the Gen 2 processor next year.
Sure.
I'm not asking them to reinvent the wheel. I just want them to be playing at the table with the same cards as everyone else. Right? And I think they deserve it. They have a history to make flagships. They shouldn't stop making flagships.
Yep. They have the brand awareness. They also have some great opportunities to take over LG. And
they have in the mid-range. And even more so, OnePlus has eaten LG's former lunch and to some extent Moto's lunch with the G series by releasing that N series of theirs.
Right. And it's not saying that LG was doing a whole lot in the flagship space. Of course, they were doing some really, really neat form factors that we had never seen before, like the Wing. The Velvet was a great device.
The Wing. Oh my God, I love the Wing.
Right.
To this day.
But of course, LG went out for a reason. Clearly, Apple and Samsung were just eating their lunch. But at the same time, there certainly were some sales that LG was taking advantage of that are no longer there, that people are now having to go over to Apple or Samsung.
Yeah.
So this was a golden opportunity for Motorola to come in and scoop up whatever LG sales there were and continue to grow as a result.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity there. I think there is a brand. I think there's a product there. The software is really a differentiator. That's the only thing they didn't mess up on last year's Edge 2021. The software was brilliant. That's the thing that saved that phone, if anything. And this phone, the software is brilliant, but with more brilliant hardware around it, just the price is off. So I think there's room there, and I think it'll get to it. I want you to put your analyst hat on for a second.
Ooh, that's dangerous.
Do you have an analyst hat somewhere? Find it, put it on, and tell me what your thoughts are on this Nothing Phone 1 teaser. Because it's not really, is it an announcement?
It's an announcement of an announcement.
Yeah. What's your analysis? Really quick. Because I don't know what I feel about this. I feel like I could spend an entire show on this, or I can spend 5 minutes on it because we don't know enough.
Right. So I think my first impression was this is exactly what Carl did at OnePlus. Yes. His marketing strategy was to leak, air quotes, leak every single spec separately. You never saw 2 specs together in the run up to any OnePlus device. And he did that on purpose because he wanted to continue to build the hype up. And it frustrated everybody. And I think this is exactly what he's doing right now, is he's trying to find a way to build up hype and keep the news cycles going as much as possible especially to buy some more time before the phone is ready. Of course, we saw Carl showing it off again in a leaked photo at MWC, showing it off to Qualcomm's CEO.
Cristiano Amon. I want to say, by the way, I had lunch with Don McGuire of Qualcomm recently because this GDC this week, Game Developer Conference, San Francisco, and he told me that the feet you see in that photo are his feet. A little bit of trivia for the inside baseball trivia here, folks.
So he knows a little bit more than he's leading on.
No, he did mention that they are definitely making a phone with a Snapdragon chip. That's all he said. So I don't know more, but I know that it's his feet now. So that's important.
Yeah. I feel like it was a given, though, that it was going to be a Snapdragon chip.
Of course.
Carl's not going to be showing it off to Cristiano if it's not a Qualcomm chip, right?
Well, that would be Yeah, a bit awkward.
Right.
Check out our Exynos phone.
Here's what we got going on with MediaTek.
Yeah.
So
that would actually make more sense, actually. That to me, like
with the Dimensity 9000 or 8100, I think it is.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that'd be great. I am very confused by this device and by this teaser. Basically, let's talk about the teaser itself, right? Because it was maybe 20 seconds of a few random lights, or seemingly random lights. Of course, there's obviously more purpose to it. These random lights that are just shining, and the people that I have been reading on Twitter just saying, okay, well, maybe this is a transparent, just like a transparent back. Maybe it's just a fluorescent backlighting kind of a gimmicky thing. Not really sure exactly. So what is your take on this?
I don't know. The aliens are coming to take us away. That's their special alien language, popping up through Carl Pay's channeling the invasion. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of don't feel like I want to speculate, because like it wouldn't be that difficult for them if they have a transparent design, which we know they're going to have based on the earbuds and the fact that they're still working with Teenage Engineering, who loves doing transparency in their products, that inevitably it's so easy to put LEDs and make something happen in the back of the phone or the front or whatever, or the edges. It's just the shapes are a little weird, and I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But I'm more concerned about not concerned, but I'm more like puzzled is the word, exactly the word I'm looking for, about the whole, like, we want to out Apple, and we want to work with Tesla, and we want to work with like all that other stuff he talked about.
Right.
Like, that doesn't make sense to me. You can't just like, remember, okay, here's one of our darlings. Remember Nextbit?
Yes.
Right? Same thing. Lots of marketing, lots of some really good ideas, well executed. They made a phone. We all liked it. It wasn't perfect, but it was, was interesting. This is where I see this product. I don't think this product is I think to me, this is a stepping stone. And call me cynical because I've lived in Silicon Valley for so long, but this is a stepping stone to nothing getting acquired by another company. There's no way that Carl can create a parallel universe OnePlus here, not without BBK's might, which they had for OnePlus. So as a niche player, how are you going to compete with Apple? Come on. And also not only that, but I think there's a better strategy as a founder to make a really great product that introduces some really cool concepts, and then have that being swept up by someone else.
Sure. And, if he really is trying to make this into the next Apple, or I was also thinking Xiaomi, because Xiaomi, of course, has a very robust ecosystem at this point.
True.
More power to him. I just don't see it becoming any more than a niche product, just like you were saying, right? Looking at the Essential phone and the Nextbit, those are great.
Yeah, the Essential is another really good one for sure.
Right, like high
we
praise.
We both love these phones, right?
Absolutely, it was a fantastic device, and I love when companies are willing to think outside the box and try to come up with something different. But unfortunately, it feels like the general market, especially in the US, just wants to go with the same old slab device.
OnePlus can't even sell their flagships anymore in this market. Like, for a brief moment there they did, and now they're in the N series, which are very popular and successful. But that's like the Moto Gs. It's a mid-range or lower budget mid-range, and it's like like it doesn't make sense. Even if I wanted to recommend to somebody they buy a OnePlus phone right now, you can get such deals on an S22. It's hard for me even to tell them not to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Another thing that I found very interesting was that nothing has hired on the design team from Dyson.
Oh, I did not know that. I thought it was just Teenage Engineering. I guess, okay.
Right. So they hired on one of the senior design managers at Dyson, and then he basically brought the rest of his team with him. So that does make me wonder even more what this final product is going to look like.
Built-in vacuum?
See, that would be a nice differentiator.
Do you remember the projector phone?
Oh my gosh. Yes, the projector phone. Oh,
That was Samsung. I mean, it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like a fly in the sky kind of fly by night type of deal.
Oh, I'm so surprised that thing didn't catch on fire.
It was hot, literally.
It really was hot. Especially if the Note 7 can catch on fire. Why not the protector phone?
It's the second show in a row where we mentioned the Note 7. I can already feel the lawyers suiting up here at Samsung for me mentioning it.
I didn't even plan that, but
I know
you're
you
welcome.
Didn't. Thank you.
Say hello to the lawyers for me.
I will.
Carl also showed a little bit of a peek at the software. Like, what did you think about the software?
That makes more sense. That makes more sense to me. The software looks exactly what I expect after using the earbuds, and the whole the branding of them, like that dot matrix font. All that is great. I'm in. I'm 100% on board. It looks great. It looks minimalist. It looks clean. It looks nice. It looks a little retro with that dot matrix. Super awesome. But remember who did the dot matrix first, right?
Right.
HTC dot cases. Are you traveling back in time in your head here?
I mean, yes, I already was with the protector phone, but even more now with HTC.
There you go.
So, yeah, I do like that it's different, but he's also. So here's the other interesting thing: is he was interviewed by The Verge, and he was saying he wants the Nothing phone to have Android, but just the essentials, where every byte has a purpose. Which seems very, very vague to me. I don't understand exactly what he's going for here. Does he mean that it's going to be a lighter version of Android, so it's more efficient? Because that hasn't always worked out very well with Android devices. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's, he's created some buzz. Like when I did the topics for this podcast, there are some things I knew I wanted to hit, and then I'm like, I always do a quick search in the tech eco verse of news, and the Nothing just was like completely obliterating the news cycle, and so it's working. So I want to give him kudos for that, and I want to move on to talk about Realme, because they've announced. So at MWC, Realme told us. I mean, I was there at the press conference. They're like, hey, we're making phones soon with 150 watt charging. And I'm like, yeah, get in line with OnePlus, or the other way around. Or OnePlus should get in line with Realme, because they pretty much announced it almost on the same day that they're both making phones with 150 watt charging this year. But I do have to give Realme credit for being the first to actually ship it, because I've had two phones now with 120 watt charging from Xiaomi, and it's kind of mind blowing to put it on the charger and have it go from 0 to 117 minutes.
That is wild.
I know. And that at 150 watt, I guess it's going to take 12 or 13 or 15, whatever it is, minutes. And I mean, wow. But what got me more excited is that it's the first time we've had a Dimensity 8100 phone announced as well. So that's cool. And
that's going to be really interesting to see how that performs.
I agree.
Do you have one coming to you?
I will, as soon as this is a Chinese version. I think that Realme always sends me the global versions when they become available. So, I know there's some Dimensity 9000 phones coming too, and I think I've got my name on one of them. So that'll be interesting to see. But the point is, look, I love the Realme phones in general. They deliver a lot of value for the money, whether they're shipping with MediaTek or Qualcomm. And this is interesting to me insofar that it has both a new processor, in this case from MediaTek, and this 150 watt charging, and a cool looking design with the racing stripes, like a lot of the GT phones they've done before. And the specs aren't bad. Like it's, the price, of course, is always super competitive. They have two options here. They have a 150 watt 4500 milliamp hour system and an 80 watt 5000 milliamp hour system. So you get a choice depending on how fast you want to charge and stuff. And the brick looks pretty massive, of course, but you'd expect that. So we're looking at like $408 for the I think for 8 gigabyte 256 gigabyte version.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing price. You look at the specs on this thing. It has, besides the charging, it has the Dimensity chip. It has that amount of storage I just mentioned, which is a pretty decent starting point, 8256. It has, 6.7 AMOLED, 120 hertz. Their AMOLEDs are generally pretty good, so I think it'll be nice. It's Realme UI, which is basically like ColorOS. And let's see, cameras is what I want to know. Here we go. Oh yeah, look at that. 50 megapixel IMX766 with OIS. Do you know who's got that camera?
Who?
Oppo Find X3 Pro and Oppo Find X5 Pro and Realme 9 Pro Plus, which just came out a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, which is, are you ready? A $300 phone with a Sony IMX766 with OIS. That phone is the best camera phone for the money, short of going to a Pixel 4, like the one that was 4G, or to a iPhone SE used.
Oh my goodness.
Because think about it, $300 for a Sony IMX766 with OIS. That's going to completely obliterate that Moto phone, for example. That sensor is so good, right? That was the ultra-wide sensor on the OnePlus 9. It is the main sensor and the ultra-wide on the Oppo Find X3 Pro and Oppo Find X5 Pro. It is the main sensor on the Realme GT2 Pro, the one they just launched at MWC, the flagship with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. It is also on that crazy little affordable Realme phone. It's bonkers. And remember, BBK Group shares all of their imaging pipeline across all three brands. And lately, it's been mostly Oppo driving that hard. And Oppo's color science, in my opinion, is the best on the market today, period. Like, it doesn't matter if they use Hasselblad branding or not. That's just a gimmick at this point. But their color science, dude, it is better than Apple's. It is better than Samsung's. It is better than Pixel. I'm telling you now. It's freaking amazing.
I am very intrigued at how they are able to pull that off, especially at such a low price point. And obviously, doing it across several brands helps because you're doing it more in bulk. But still, doesn't seem like a camera for a $300 to $400 device should be better than the Moto Edge Plus that we were just talking about.
Well, this is not even just better. This is better than the camera on the OnePlus 10 Pro, the main camera, in my opinion. It's better than the main camera on probably the Galaxy S22 and S22 Plus, not the S22 Ultra.
Right.
I mean, we're talking like it's solid. Now, it's not computationally wise quite as advanced as what, like Google's doing, because they still have the upper hand there. But I think it's a better sensor than the main sensor on the Pixel 6 Pro, 100%. And
That's
6.
fascinating.
Yeah. I think, because Sony just makes, in my opinion, Sony still makes the best sensors. Like, there's just nothing around it. You can compensate a little bit by tuning the software, right? But ultimately, if you want to be on top of the game with imaging right now, and you're an Android phone maker, go talk to Sony, because immediately you are at a kind of a baseline level that is far better than the Moto baseline level.
Right.
Since we're using Moto as a scale now for all phone camera systems. But look, I'm excited about this. I think this is, I've got the previous one, the GT Neo3 here. I have the GT2 Pro as well, which is the big flagship, and they're killer. Like, the GT2 Pro is basically giving you a 90% of a Oppo Find X3 Pro experience from last year with that microscope and that main sensor, and for $800 with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. The only thing it's missing is wireless charging.
That's pretty
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you think the Oppo Find X3 Pro last year and the Find X5 Pro this year are like 1,200 euros or something. Now, of course, there's ceramic back, blah, blah, blah. Like, what I'm saying? Like, this, it's a different dimension. Like, Oppo's playing in that premium tier, right? They don't even care. Like, they're almost going with the, 1,200 euros doesn't seem rich enough. Let's go for 1,400 euros next, kind of thing. That kind of approach, right? Like, they're really placing the price as a selling point, right? And some people don't like that and don't understand that, and I get that. But I think that there's a market for that out there.
If I may, I would love to go back to the fast charge discussion, because I am very curious about this. I know we talked a little bit about the 150 watt, and you said that you had used devices with 200 watt. Is that right?
Yeah. So they sent me, what was it? The Xiaomi. I got the Xiaomi 11T Pro from Xiaomi last year. And
that's on the market. It's not an early development prototype.
No, it's on the
anything.
market. And then there's another one coming up. It's under embargo. I can't tell you about it yet, but it's going to be a less than $300 phone with 120 watt charging from the folks over at just Xiaomi group.
Okay.
So my point is, it's not some experimental thing. This is like, you can buy this. It comes in the box with the charger and everything.
Well, my question for you is going to be, how far can we go with the fast charging? Like, what is the max? Like 10 years from now, when we're looking at phones, the way things are going, like how, because at some point,
we've already seen 200 and 240 watt as prototype. So
right. But
so
like
you double the 120 watts. So from 17 minutes, you go down to 9 minutes.
But yes, you can. But I feel like that's almost a gimmick, like just so you can say that it's faster than any other device on the market. But when in reality, is 8 minutes going to really make a difference? How much of an impact does that have on power efficiency? Obviously, overheating can be an issue with certain types of fast charging technology.
Yeah.
So, like, is there a certain point where we just kind of get to a ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, I think 200 watts kind of like overkill. So I think we'll probably steady state there, right?
Yeah.
Like I think 240 watts or so.
I feel like it's the megapixel war, right? Like people want to say that they have the highest count and not actually factoring in the user experience.
There's a couple of things you should consider here. The first one is that it is actually a lot of the battery technology we're seeing in these phones is coming straight from the EV world, right? A lot of the improvements in battery technology and the speed of charging, the thermal management, the longevity management of the battery systems have all been developed in the car space and the EV space and are now benefiting the phone manufacturers. And that's what you're seeing. We have much better AI-based charging algorithms that can not only monitor the batteries in real time much better than before, but also predict the behavior of the battery based on AI modeling. 1, 2, better chemistry on the battery, so they're more bulletproof to be charged that fast. And you're looking at, most batteries in the old days were 600 to 800 charge cycles. Now we're looking at double that, right? And if you manage it properly, you can keep that battery at 80% of its capacity in the first 4 years of use. So even with those fast charging sessions, right? So if it's managed properly by the software, it's pretty bulletproof. But one of the things you're completely forgetting is that there are many markets like India and Africa too, where people don't have reliable access to power. So charging becomes opportunistic. So if you have access to an outlet in that train station for 5 minutes before your train comes, that 5 minutes of time is gold for you because you're going home where you have no power.
That's a very fair point.
So your phone lasts 2 days on a charge already because it's got that massive 5,000 milliamp hour battery. But now if you can charge that fully in 17 minutes, it means that 5 minutes at the train station are going to give you 50%, right?
Right.
Or whatever it is.
That makes a lot of sense.
That is not something I think we should underestimate. Us in the West here, we're kind of like just charging every night. We have that weird habit, like, wireless charging is also something we want because it's in our cars and we like to plop our phones on a stand while we're working in the daytime on our bigger computers. But that other part of the world, that's their computer. They use it all the time. They can't be down. Like they can't have it just sit there and idle, right?
Right. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when we're thinking about why the US version of the Moto has, was it 32 watts versus 65
30 versus 68, which is a weird number, by the way.
It is. And granted, you would think, okay, well, it should be exactly the same between each model because, they should be the same model. But if there are opportunities for them to save money here and there, of course, the US market doesn't really care as much about, how fast the charging is. As long as you can do it fast enough, like go 0 to 50 in half an hour or so. I feel like that's kind of what the milestone we've hit here in the US is if you can come out and say in your marketing, 0 to 50% in less than half an hour, then you're golden. Whereas you can do on the GT Neo3 0 to 50 in 5 minutes, which is clearly much more impressive. But to your point, in other regions of the world, that is, a huge difference between having a phone and having a brick.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why we're seeing this pick up so much on this, particularly in these mid-range phones in markets abroad right now.
Yeah.
Right. Realme and Redmi, BBK Group and Xiaomi Group and Poco to some extent are very, very popular in India, for example, right? Because of that. Let's switch gears and cover the final topic for today because I'm looking at the time, and that's the Honor X8. And this is like the third or fourth phone from Honor since they went independent, and obviously it has GMS, which is nice. But this is the most affordable one they've launched so far. So I think we've had, let's see, the one I have is the Honor 50, which is a mid-ranger. There's an Honor Magic 4 that just came out at MWC, and 4 Pro and 4 Ultimate, which are really incredible. They're proper S22 competitors at every level. And then there was an Honor 60, which was basically a refresh of the 50. I want to say there was an Honor 40 before that, but that never left China. And this is their first kind of like, let's go in that mid-range, budget mid-range Moto G, Vivo V23, Realme 9 Pro Plus, $300-ish, like super competitive India market thing. And that thing looks baller sexy. Look at the bezels on that thing, right?
Yeah, it looks, I have a huge amount of respect for any budget device that looks good. Because I feel like the default... You guys
did that at TCL, by the way. That's what I really loved about it.
Absolutely. I was always blown away by how well we were able to make those devices, that are $200 or less. And granted, you start getting under $100 and it becomes burner phone territory, and they all look exactly the same. But if you can have $100 to $200 device that actually looks and feels much more premium, it's got a kind of a cool look to it, like a really cool color, whatever the case may be, maybe some design on the back that you wouldn't see anywhere else. I love when devices can do that.
Yeah, so like the last one that to me did that, there's the Realme, entire Realme 9 series, as I mentioned, the entire Vivo V23 series as well. The Oppo Reno series does that to some extent, although it's a little priced a little higher. And then of course there's the Redmi Note series is always like the most bang for your buck. Like when I reviewed the Redmi Note 10 Pro last year, I have the 11 Pro this year too, but I haven't reviewed it for anyone. But when I reviewed the 10 Pro last year for Elena at Geekspin, I basically said it's half the price of a Mi 11, the Xiaomi 11 flagship, with 90% of the specs.
Mm.
And that's exactly what they were delivering. If you didn't want 5G, you were getting literally 90% of the specs of that flagship phone for half the price. It was insane. And this thing is $245, and it has a Snapdragon 680, a 4G chip. It has a 6.7-inch 1080p LCD at 90 hertz. LCD, but I'll live with it. 6 gigs of RAM, 120 gigs of storage, 64 megapixel main camera, and a bunch of sticker cams, 5 megapixel wide, ultra wide. That's going to be crunchy. 2 megapixel macro, 2 megapixel depth. Okay. 16 megapixel front, 4,000 milliamp hour battery, and 22 and a half, weird number, watt wire charging. And, that's it. Like, there's nothing to it, but you look at the design and you're like, oh, yeah, this looks like a phone you can pull out in public and don't feel embarrassed about it,
Yeah. And I'm looking at this device here, I'm pulling up the pictures. And if I didn't know anything about this device, I would be looking at this saying, that looks very similar to an iPhone. I know there's some differences, of course, but overall, the trim, the kind of the flat edge or flat sides.
So the flat sides is a thing this year, Brad. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of Xiaomi phones and BBK Group phones in this $200 to $300 price range are coming out with a version that looks Samsung-y with the kind of like waterfall screen and the thin tapered edges, and a version that looks iPhone-y, which has the slab sides and the very kind of rectangular edges to it. And it's really interesting because they're like basically kind of like channeling the flagship of your choice design in a more affordable form factor.
Oh, absolutely. iPhone-y. I love that.
iPhone-y. I like that.
So there was something here when I was looking at the specs that I found intriguing, and I admittedly don't know enough about it, so I want to ask you about it. So one of the specs talks about, I think it's the RAM, where it has 6 gigs plus 2 gigs of turbo RAM.
a lot of companies are doing this now. BBK Group being the number one kind of guilty of that. They do it. You can actually pick up any like Realme, Oppo, or OnePlus phone that's come out in the last year, and you'll see in the about phone, you'll see the actual amount of RAM and then this number of RAM, turbo, whatever. And that's basically just a kind of a RAM disk where they're using flash storage. Like they allocate certain amount of flash storage, kind of swap partition like you do in computers, where when you run out of RAM, it starts taking apps that are not in use and putting them in that RAM disk. And storage is so fast now that it actually does work. It's not as fast as the stuff being in memory because you're swapping back from basically disk, right? From like flash storage.
That was going to be my question, is how well does it work? Or is it just more of a marketing gimmick to say, hey, we actually have more RAM than we actually do? It works,
but it's not real RAM, and it does have bottlenecks associated with it. But it's certainly more beneficial than just having 6 gigs of RAM if you implement this software feature, right? But it's, something that OnePlus started doing years ago on their flagships. One of the reasons the app starts so quickly that they're pre-cached, right? So like that's one of the areas of doing that. This is kind of like the reverse, where you're not pre-caching them in RAM, in real RAM, but you're actually swapping running apps into like flash storage temporarily to give yourself back some RAM to run what you're running in the front right now, kind of thing. And again, that's called virtual memory on PCs and Macs. It's been around forever. It's just that they're implementing it, and because it's flash storage and it's so fast, UFS 2.1, 3.1 nowadays is very quick, you're getting some real benefits from that, implementing that, right?
I see. Okay.
That's my understanding. So, folks, keep an eye on this Honor phone. I don't know if I'm going to get one. I mean, I could probably, but I'm trying to kind of focus on the important phones, and I'm not quite sure this is as important as, say, the Magic 4 that I really need to get my hands on. So, I have a lot of phones coming in all the times, but let me know maybe in Twitter and stuff if you want me to get my hands on this phone and give you an overview. Brad, we need to wrap up. Do you want to tell the audience where they can find you on the internet, your social media handles and all that good stuff?
Sure. The best place to find me is Phone Wisdom on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, but I also have an Instagram at Brad Molen. So
there you go.
Yeah. Come at me.
Absolutely. Folks, you should follow Brad on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you want to comment on the podcast, you should do it on Twitter. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL. Also at Tankgirl on Instagram. It's like Tankgirl, the comic book character. Just drop the vowels. That's how you remember. So we'll find you on Twitter. Hopefully you can ask us some questions, make some comments. And check out my Instagram for pretty pictures of phone, pretty pictures of cars, pretty pictures taken with phones in general. The podcast obviously lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. So please subscribe. Tell your friends. There's an RSS feed there as well. If you can rate or review the show in your podcast app, please consider doing that. It helps. There's a couple of YouTube channels you should subscribe to that have content related to the podcast. youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the little notification icon, comment in the videos, comment about the podcast even. I don't mind, I'll answer. The two channels are basically as follows. The main channel, Mobile Tech Podcast, is about the phones and the audio device, the personal audio, all stuff that's like smartwatches directly related to the phone ecosystem. In Mobile Tech More, it's all like travel tech, car tech, home automation, more peripheral, but still related to mobile in some way or another. So there you go. And then, of course, you've already heard this earlier in the show. There's a Patreon, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. There's some perks and some tiers. If you want to support this podcast, please consider joining Patreon. A great way for me to continue doing this podcast is for you to help. So Patreon has, for example, a tier for video version. The video version comes out a little before the public audio version, and you get to see me and my guests on video. It's slightly less edited, so a little more raw, a little more real, and you get to see the phones and stuff sometimes, so it's fun. The other tier is one for a Discord. So if you want to join my Discord chat, you can do that and chat with me. So that's another thing we have in there. There's a bunch of different tiers, so check that out. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I want to thank my patrons for being with me, and helping me out. Again, as I said, I can use your help. So consider helping with Patreon. And of course, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible's been with us forever and we love them. They have a deal for you. You can get a 30-day free trial and you get to keep a book at the end. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And if you don't know what Audible is, well, let me give you a quick overview. But basically, it is the number one audiobook platform in the universe. So if you like to read books like I do, but maybe you're working all day and your eyes are tired at the end of the day because you've been staring at your computer screen, or maybe you're a delivery driver with FedEx or something and you're driving all day. Well, guess what? Audible's got you covered. You just put your headphones on or earbuds and you listen to a book. You can close your eyes if you're in the evening and you're tired, or you can just drive around and do your deliveries while listening to your Audible book. It's awesome. So look, if you like books like I do, you should check it out because, they have an incredible selection of books. There's also short stories. There's podcasts. Some books are read by the authors, which I really love. And, it's kind of epic. You get on road trips. It's awesome. Like a book lasts 9 hours. So you're just turn it on and just drive and enjoy and listen and get into it. So yeah, Audible's cool. So if you want to help them, help me, consider clicking through that link, audibletrial.com/mobiletech. Get your 30-day free trial, keep a book. Hopefully you stick around. And yeah, I think you'll love it. I want to thank Audible for being with us since the early days again. And you, Brad, for coming back on the show. That was so awesome to have you.
It's been a thrill. I'm so happy we can make this work. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll hopefully have you on at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.